Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Meter, and I am the founder and director of SommCon USA. And I wanted to say thank you for joining us for day 4 of SommCon's Virtual Summit, our new reality in today's COVID environment, but very excited for the week that we have had and all of the educational opportunities that have been provided to our industry, the amazing winemakers and educators who have joined us. And today, the session that you are about to be part of is no exception. I'm really thrilled with the panel that's been assembled here today, and a special thank you to Meredith May at the Tasting Panel and the Somm Journal for their continued support and partnership and their sponsorship of today's session. So I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to introduce Lars Light, who's the Vice President of Education for the Tasting Panel and Somm Journal, to introduce today's panel. Lars.
The mortal sin of of Zoom. I forgot my unmute. Thank you very much, Michelle. You're never in the way. You are the way. So thrilled to be part of SommCon's Virtual Summit. Thank you very much. So great to be part of this team with SommCon, the Somm Journal, Tasting Panel Magazine, and the Paso Robles Cabernet Collective. I want to give a shout out to my colleague, my boss, Meredith May, publisher and editor-in-chief of the Somm Journal and Tasting Panel Magazine. Hello, Meredith. She's muted, so we'll, hopefully, there you are.
Here I am. Okay. Hi, everybody. I want to thank everybody. We love being part of the Cab Collective. We've been your media partner for years now, and I appreciate your support. It's so good to see all your faces and taste all your wines.
Great. Thank you. And I just want to remind everybody that this is going to be recorded. So suitable for blackmail, you guys? No, it's not. But everybody can refer to it later on. It'll be available on the SommCon USA site, the Somm Journal site as well. And there will be a recap in the November tasting panel, giving some editorial and reviewing what everybody said. So remember, you can tune into that as well as reviewing the webinar itself. So thank you all for being here. Paso Robles, if you have a European or a Spanish sensitivity, that's my natural tendency is to call it Paso Robles, but either way, it's a beautiful area. You guys have some very unique terroir and character. It's a very special place with your diurnal shift, your calcareous soils that we're going to hear all about. And I have to tell you all, I often hear a lot of producers from Paso comparing themselves to other areas. Paso is like Napa in this. It's different than Bordeaux in this, and so forth. And I have to tell you, you have nothing to have any worries about. Paso is a unique area, and from what I understand, Paso has the advantage of having tremendous phenolics because of your daylight, the exposure, the slow growing season, and I think if anything, all those other regions should have phenol envy. So with that note, I'm going to throw the ball, so to speak, to the legendary Gary Everly to talk to us about your corner of Paso, what you're doing there, how you're doing it, and what it's all about. So Gary, take it away, please.
Well, I think, most people by this time, because I've been doing this almost 50 years, know my story. But, I came out of Louisiana where I discovered wine while I was working on a doctorate in genetics, and went to UC Davis for a doctorate in fermentation science. And I was very fortunate. And I came to make Cabernet. I mean, I fell in love with Cabernet. I went from drinking Matus and Lancers to Cabernet and first growth Bordeaux. And since I was on a doctoral program with a major in enology and a minor in viticulture, Doc Olmo, who was head of the Vit department at that time, was my committee member. And at that time, the enology department and the soil science department at Davis were doing a survey of the coastal regions, coastal counties, looking for the next potential great grape growing. And at that time, it was always red. I mean, they were talking coastal kinds, they're talking red grapes. And I was Doc Olmo and Doc Alley's Sherpa. I carried the mattock and the shovel and the backpack full of soil samples, and I dug the holes where they told me to. And we made 3 trips down here while I was at Davis, and the soil samples would go back to the soil science department. And Doc Olmo, Doc Alley, Ralph Kunke, Dr. Kunke, he was from Atascadero, and they just absolutely loved. I gathered the weather data because we had a flight service station at the airport at that time, and they had very, very accurate hourly weather data. And I gathered that and the rain data, and we had the soil. And I remember Doc Olmo and Doc Alley, everybody saying, this is where you want to be. Paso Robles will be the next great Cabernet producing region in the state of California. And I said, Eureka, I am home. And then it was just a matter of getting the, what I thought the right clones. And again, I really relied on Doc Olmo. And the clones that I brought down were Dr. Olmo's clones. At that time, it was clone 101 and 102. I believe they're now called 7 and 8. But Doc Olmo swore that there were 2 separate clones. I could never tell them apart. To me, they were identical. But they came from the Madame Dupin's vineyard. This was George Latour's daughter. And this was the vineyard that supplied all of the BV private reserve up through 74 when Hubeline bought them. And then they increased the production and it went different places. But it's a very shy producing clone in that, a good crop off of it is 4.5 ton, and that's really pushing it. It's a small cluster, typically 1/7 of a pound, whereas Infidel typically goes about 1 pound per cluster. Round berry, not an oblong berry, just a round berry. Essentially a piece of skin wrapped around 4 seeds. And you get a tremendous amount of skin to juice ratio with these wines. And it makes, we were talking about the phenolics earlier, it's a very, if you look at the total extract, it's right up there with these big wines coming out of Napa. So the phenols are there, but it's a very soft, they age beautifully. I have every Cabernet I've made since 76, and I guarantee you, with maybe 2 exceptions, every one of them would be a delight to drink today. And the exceptions were 2 very unusual years. But it's, and I think certainly early on, because I was the source of so many things, Cabernet, Sriracha. I planted, the Wild Horse for Kenny Volk and Steinbeck vineyards. And I was the big source of cuttings. And those 2 clones, and I eventually, and I mixed them because, like I said, I couldn't tell the difference. When we did the Estrella, I had 2 40-acre blocks of one clone and 3 40-acre blocks of the other. And I made wine from them separately for 5-6 years. I could not. And Tommy Myers, who great palate, he's a winemaker now over at the winemaker emeritus at Castoro, and the guys that came through, none of us could tell the difference. It made the 2 clones made the same damn wine, very good wine. So over the years, I will tell you that when I was selling wood, we would mix the 2 clones, and just depending on where we were planting them. Do you have any questions of me? I mean, I can go on for way too long.
I've heard that, and I've actually seen it too, but no, you can't, Gary. It's fascinating. These are great pioneering stories. Let me ask you a question. I happen to be a fortunate man in that I have a bottle of your 2017 Vineyard Selection in front of me. Tell me a little bit about how.
You're lucky. I have one too.
Look at that. It's a good membership to be in.
Well, you know, I mean, I came to make, you know, to California, both at the old Estrella and then at my own winery when I opened it up in '83 to make Cabernet. And Cabernet continues to be our flagship. And our estate is from the vineyard right here. I've stuck with the estate sense, and that had the vineyard and the winery have to be contiguous. And, you know, early on, you know, we were new, we were Paso Robles, we were struggling. I mean, I think I promoted Paso probably more than I did even Eberly early on, because nobody knew where it was. You kept getting these questions. Is that in Texas or is that in Baja California? But we were having really pretty good luck, in fact, very good luck getting wine into off-premise situations. The wine shops were great. They loved, they tasted. Restaurants were a little bit more hesitant to take on new labels. Even today, they're still that way. So what we did was we created a wine, we called our Vineyard Select. And what I did for 7, 8 years, as Paso Robles became more and more popular, we would go out and we would contract with growers for their first 3 crops, because, you know, almost all vitis vinifera, you know, the first 3 crops tend to be, you know, they're teenagers, they tend to be a little bit rambunctious, a little bit bigger berry until you know, get the vines under control. And it made a softer wine. I called it a cocktail cab, and we marketed it as a wine for the back bar. So when somebody comes into a restaurant, it was the wine, it was a Cabernet that you could sit and have without food, or you could sit and have with an hors d'oeuvre while you were waiting for your table. And we didn't make that much of it. I didn't expect it to be much of a great sales tip. As it turned out, it became a monster. And now that wine is our single largest production wine. We make about 7,000 cases a year of the Vineyard Select, and only about 4,000 cases of the estate. And our total production is approaching 30,000. We've never made 30,000, but I keep telling people that's our size. But and I make way too many wines. You know, I got in, you know, Cabernet, the white wine boom was starting, so I had to make a little Chardonnay, and my wife loved Robert Mondavi's Moscato de Oro, so we always made a little Muscat. And then there was Syrah. Brian Crozier, when I was at Davis, piqued my interest in Syrah, and then Zinfandel, Barbera. I love Barbera. We make Barberas in '78. Now we've got Viognier. First time I've ever enjoyed white wine. It's the other red wine.
Love it.
But yeah, I mean, you know, I've been, you know, this is, if you count my time at Davis, this is really my 50th year in the business. I enjoy it. I've had, you know, very fortunate in getting to really get to know, and I think help, guys like Tom, Robert Nadeau. Robert worked for me.
Yep.
And he's turned into, you know, one of California's best. He and Vic Roberts over at his place, 2, I think, of the most underrated Paso winemakers, because they don't have the gift of gab. They don't have the big mouth. They tend to be really nice people, unlike, you know, a lot of us that go out and generate. But and you know, so many people that we've worked with over the years, and I've probably spun off more tasting room managers than anything. But anyway, Uh,
That's cool.
I think that's the Eberly story, and why don't I shut up and let somebody else get in now?
All right. I'm going to ask you one fast question because we are at the limits of our time for you, but one very fast question that came in from John Logan. With your 50 years of experience, what have you witnessed in the vineyard in terms of climate change? And what do you think, is it going to adversely affect or change your wines, your grapes, your winemaking style?
Well, when I first came down, climate was so critically important, and I gathered all of that data from the airport, and 68 and 69 are still the hottest summers that Paso Robles has ever experienced. And I had 6 recording thermographs for 6 or 7 years, where we would record the temperature 12 times a day. And what I have observed over the last 2 decades, and I would take this back, with Howie Steinbeck, who was, farming here for like 6 generations. And we both have talked about this, and with rare exceptions, as climate change is always going on. I think we have to sort of decide who makes or why, but I think it's just a natural thing. But Paso, as other areas in the country seem to be getting warmer, Paso actually, if you look over the last 2 decades, I think the growing season has actually been getting a little cooler.
Huh. That's interesting. All right. Very cool. Well, thank you, Gary. Appreciate that very much. And we're going to go over to Joe Spellman right now from Justin Vineyards. He's their winery wine educator. Joe's always a familiar figure at SommCon. Always see him in the halls there. So, Joe, welcome. You're coming to us from Chicago, or are you in the mountain?
That's right. I am in my cellar in Chicago, and I'm pretending to be in front of on a hill above Justin, our tasting room and restaurant and so forth, which I've been doing for many months now. A lot of chicanery and scenery going on. So really honored to be with this excellent panel, and it's always great to have Gary Eberly kick things off. I've so long revered and admired what he does and says, and all the legwork he did in the early days of making Paso a really modern place for wine grape growing in a different way. I think everybody in this group has, and now that we know Cabernet Sauvignon is the key variety for the region, and hopefully that'll continue. It seems like some of the weather patterns and some of the viticultural work that have been done have kind of scared off that Rhone movement for a while. It's still there, and believe me, Justin has embraced it as well. I remember years ago at a what was that event, the Hospice du Rhône, and Michel Chapoutier was talking about, or he was on the panel, and I think somebody from Paso was talking about how he had a Chapoutier clone of Syrah, and Michel Chapoutier said, I don't know anything about a clone from my vineyard. Obviously, it had been suitcased in by somebody. I can't imagine who would do that.
Remember what I said before about blackmail.
But anyway, Cabernet's the subject, and I've been honored to be with Justin now for almost 13 years. Known Justin a long time when he was starting up back in the late 80s, really making wine, and first encountered Justin wines in a way that you do and Meredith does as a writer, journalist, reviewer when I was with the American Wine Competition, and wrote a lot of tasting notes, and Isosceles was kind of a new breed, new entry, and where the hell is this Paso Robles place? Like I wrote in the chat, I hear that all the time. Hey, what part of Napa is Paso Robles in? You just have to get the maps out and talk about a lot of different things. But I, of course, came to this business not as a grape grower, not as a winemaker, still don't know a darn thing about those things, but as a sommelier. Sommeliers, I think, are critical for us to reach, and that's the whole point of SommCon. And I've been thrilled that Michel has been very supportive of Paso Robles presentations of various sorts when we've been able to do it live. and do some tasting. I see you're doing some tasting, Lars. That's good to see. In
In
fact, I had to do the sommelier thing myself and open my bottle of isosceles, it's not isosceles, of Cabernet Reserve, because we decided today that we should really be pure. You know, as the winery has evolved and gotten pretty big and started accumulating vineyards and vineyard relationships, and of course the core has always been Cabernet driving the isosceles, Cabernet Franc driving the justification. Several other wines have come along. I think we have 7 different wines that have Cabernet Sauvignon as a significant portion in the blend. But this is the only one I know that we do that is 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. And I think that's a tough trick, because some Cabernets in some places can be a little bit too angular in a way. And most of this is coming out of Adelaida, but Fred and Scott and our team have always sourced from other vineyards that we do not own or fully manage. And they bring a lot to the table, because different parts of Paso do different things well with the variety. And I think with making a straight Cabernet, especially one that's been in barrel for close to 2 years, you know, settling it down, getting those phenolics to be acceptable to the sommelier, the restaurant buyer, the steakhouse, what have you, can be a pretty tough trick, because we release them pretty young. This is a 2018 I'm showing or drinking, and you know, it was just released. I've been warned by people at the winery, man, that wine is rugged. So it's the first time I'm trying it. And I might as well see if I can't break this cork out of here without actually breaking the cork or the glass. But you know, what we've done over the years has been to really prize Cabernet and blends. And when it sits by itself, boy, it's a fantastic, you know, almost indigo robe with this beautiful ruby edge. And, you know, straight Cabernet from Paso, I think, succeeds a little more than, say, straight Cabernet from a lot of other places. Yep. It was funny that Gary referenced BV. I remember back old bottles in the 70s, they were all proud of being 100% Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley, right? And nowadays, I think we suspect that, because that's not really the way to compose a wine. But composing different sites, this is what our team is doing all the time. They're doing a mosaic every year, a puzzle. What's going to be the right weight level, phenolic level, alcohol level for the isosceles or the isosceles reserve? And then how much of our fruit, and it's a lot of it these days, as so many young vineyards have come on, are we devoting to our most broadly distributed brand, our straight Paso Robles Cabernet, which, by the way, isn't straight. It's got a couple other varieties in it, including a couple of non-Bordeaux varieties. But that's, you know, insider news that help darken it, help spice it up a little bit. A lot of American oak on that. You know, this is all French oak. This is all classically made. You know, we have a lot of density here, the classic black fruit that we like. And frankly, to your earlier point, the softer phenolics that we get in Paso make it really drinkable young.
That is delicious.
Still, it has an edge that the isosceles doesn't, because when you use Cabernet Franc and Merlot, you're taking a lot of that tannin component out, and that wine actually gets more new oak. So just wanted to run through a couple things to share with you on this. And of course, the region is famous for having this sort of diurnal temperature shift, which you referenced, but it's also, you know, very influenced by rainfall coming across the Santa Lucia Mountains. So this comes from the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance. I'm not sure if the data is all that tight, but you know, the rainfall, moisture, and so forth out west are very different from the middle and out east. And so we get different types of Cabernet from these different places. And as I said, 70% of this wine is Adelaida, but 30% from other undisclosed parts of Paso. I asked Fred, and he didn't want to get into any detail. I don't know what the big secret is, but Steinbeck has certainly been one of our suppliers for a long time, and quite a few others in West and East and Central Paso. But anyway, as you go east, of course, things change, and airflow is different. You know, things come over the Chelan Mountains too a little differently, but most of the influence is through the Templeton Gap, and you get this sort of effect of, you know, a bit of fog line up high at 2,000 to 3,000 feet, and that is very helpful for a developing vineyard. And so, and of course, all these are rolling hills, a lot of calcareous soils. Our vineyards on the estate run from 1,200 to 1,400 feet. We have another property that goes up to 1,800 feet. And as we all know, I hope everybody in the audience has memorized the 11 sub-AVAs of Paso Robles. That's very important too, right, Gary? That certainly we're sourcing from 8 of them. How many are in this wine, I couldn't tell you, but it's pretty dense with the Adelaida style, which tends to be a little firmer, a little more ironish in a way. There's so much great stuff coming out of almost every one of these districts. Santa Margarita Ranch is developed as a fantastic source for Cabernet. El Pomar, we certainly have a property there like we do in Adelaida. And, the Estrella is still pretty dominant too and for a lot of producers. So great stuff all around. And this wine, in particular with the 2018, I think Gary's right, that Paso hasn't really gotten on average terribly hot. It's warmer a little bit by about 1.5 points than Napa, maybe by 3 points or 3 degrees than Bordeaux. Those are all the natural classic comparison points. But, we can do a lot of other places that, we have advantages over, say, Columbia Valley, because we do have a general warmth and the nightly cool down, of course. But, 2018, less than normal precipitation, that's often an issue over the winter. The natural cycle of the vine was pretty normal, but, you have these spikes in the mid-season that change things. You lose some clusters, veraison starts, you make some decisions, and you only want those tight clusters with small berries from most of these sites. So again, this wine's 100% Cabernet. We're using classic fermentation in chilled stainless steel, 21 months and about 50% new French oak. We do get accused of sometimes excessive pHs. I guess I'm out of time. Stop me. There. I timed myself. Wasn't that nice of me?
That's my job.
But anyway, go away, you. Anyway, so we do get accused of somewhat high pHs and very generous alcohol levels, which I believe contributes to Paso Robles' deliciousness.
Well said. Perfect. Thank you very much, Joe.
And Joe, if I can just bust in real quick, that Syrah did come from Chapoutier, but it came from Max. Michel's father. And Doc Olmo got it. He told me it was in the late 40s or the early 50s that he got it from Max Chapoutier from the vineyard on the east side of the river above the town of Tain.
Yeah, Hermitage. One of the greatest appellations in France, yeah.
So we know whose suitcase it came in.
Yeah, I don't think too much of the Bordeaux variety material has come from Bordeaux, though, to Paso. Anyway, that's cool. Thanks for that freshening of the story.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Gary.
Honor.
Next up is Matt Merrill from Pomar Junction, GM and proprietor. Matt, tell us about your corner of Paso.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. We're over in Templeton. Pomar Junction is a family-owned and operated winery over in the El Pomar district of Paso Robles, so kind of right in the middle there. I don't know if you can see the map there, but right where your Lars's nose is, maybe. I don't know, somewhere in that area. I think I see it right there, kind of near the bottom, a little bit to the right. So we like to think that we're kind of in a sweet spot there in between some cooler zones as you head towards the coast and get a little bit more of the cooler influence. And then certainly as you move north and east, it gets warmer in Paso. So we kind of like to think that we're in a sweet spot. My family's been managing vineyards since 1980. So basically since I was born, I have a typical story where I am eighth generation Californian, and I grew up in the middle of a 9,000 acre vineyard in King City called San Bernabé. And my dad managed that vineyard. My dad's Dana Merrill. He's the main owner of Pomar Junction. And we started another vineyard management company called Mesa Vineyard Management. And we moved, we kind of moved down into Santa Maria Valley. Robert Mondavi Properties had a need for a vineyard manager down that area. And so we started managing vineyards down in Santa Maria Valley, which led to us moving our home from King City to Paso Robles to be in the middle. And at the time, I remember asking my dad, like, why, you know, how come we don't have much in this area? And, you know, we farm kind of in cooler areas, and we're used to, you know, Burgundy style wines. And as it turns out, there was, you know, Bordeaux's were really just starting to come in Paso, and guys like, you know, Gary Everly and the Lors and Justin have really taken their time to make some excellent wines. And so that kind of led to our family buying a property called Palmer Junction over there in Templeton. And it's interesting. We still manage, you know, about 13,000 acres of vineyards from Gainey Vineyards and Tolosa and Santa Maria Valley up in the Ohana States and Monterey County, and even some up in Oregon. But our home is in Paso. That's our favorite spot. That's where our favorite wines come from. That's where, you know, we can grow some amazing Rhones as well. But our heart really has always been with the Bordeaux's. And so that's why when the Cab Collective came around, they just do an excellent job promoting just some of the best varieties that Paso Robles has, is the Cabernet, Merlot, Petit Verdot's. And that's one of the wines that I'm focusing on actually today is our Cab Forward. So it's a Cabernet blend with mostly Cabernet Sauvignon, but then also some Petit Verdot and Sur Merlot to kind of round it out. And so interesting thing, we have like a train theme because of El Pomar Junction. It's the junction of El Pomar and South El Pomar, the roads. So it kind of lends itself to that. Templeton's a historic train town as well. And then also my family, my great-grandfather was a railroad engineer over the Sierras. And so it kind of came as a natural fit to pay homage to our history and our family heritage. To my great-grandfather was the engineer for a train that was the first locomotive where they took the cab from the back and flipped it around, and they had it face forward, and that's why they call it Cab Forward. And so the actual locomotive is in the train museum in Sacramento. The number is 4294, which I don't know if you can see it at all, but it's inscribed on the side of the bottle. On every one of these bottles, there's a 4294 just to the left of the spotlight right in this area here. So it's a little bit hard to see, but it's kind of a cool little fact that we have the 4294, a train from my grandfather. It was a 1 million pound locomotive that went through the Sierras and helped push, you know, the whole row of trains through the mountains, because you had to have a lot of weight to pull that. And then also the cab was faced forward because of the soot and the smoke that would literally kill the engineer and the drivers and the people on the train and the locomotive. And so that's why they flipped it around. And today it's actually the standard of the way trains are, is the cab is in the front. So it's kind of interesting how that all came about. So yeah, we actually have a caboose and a boxcar on the property, and that kind of went into how we developed our label. We have this caboose on the front label there as well. And so we kind of have that train history, train nut type thing. But what kind of all led to was the best varieties that we have there are our Cab, our Merlot, our Bordeaux. So that's what led to this Cab Forward being kind of this designated as our highest end, most reserve wine that we have on the property. And actually, if you can see, this is our wine cellar where we do our winemaker dinners. But I grabbed, this is actually a Cab cluster right here.
Cool.
This is actually a Petit Verdot that I just grabbed from the vineyard. And then this is the Merlot from the vineyard here. And then actually I grabbed a piece of rock. This rock is this calcareous soil. It's a lot of this calcareous rock out there. We got some really beautiful Linné Colado soils that are out there in the vineyard. And I think that's what attributes to the quality in the grapes in that area. Is we got this Linné Colado limestone soils just mixed with some rich richer soils so that the wines really express the terroir of the area. The cooling breezes come from the Templeton Gap, and what you kind of get left with is just a really nice, dark, opulent wine, well balanced with, you know, the pH is on this one is a 3.6, typically, or, you know, well under 4 in that area. We let this one ripen up. On average, the Brix was about 25 for the 3 varieties. And let's see, you got a little bit in your glass there.
I do.
Mark?
I'm getting a little note of some like black licorice on this, which is really nice.
And
Really
so I know for me, like we managed some vineyards, let's see, with the, and one of the owners owned the Shalom winery in Monterey County. And I just remember just falling in love with the black licorice. So our winemaker is Jim Shoemate. He's a professor at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. He was actually going to be here speaking today, but he had a lab that he thought was really important and didn't want to miss. Yeah, he teaches at Cal Poly. We're big Cal Poly family. Both my parents and my wife and I all graduated from Cal Poly, and we really like supporting the industry with. You know, Cal Poly does a really nice job putting out people who work for us and do a really good job out in the vineyards and the wineries. So anyways, yeah, silky tannins, not overly done, not overly extracted, because we feel like the wines are really made in the vineyard. And even, you know, I've heard our winemaker actually admit to that we just get it into him, and he just has to try not to screw it up. And he just, you know, volunteered that. So that's how we knew he was the right guy for the job for us as well. He just loves this fruit every year. We gave him a chance to put together his favorite barrels. We made about 150 cases or so. It's really starting to open up now, which is taking some time. It's in 2014, and it's still a little tight. It still could use more years, I believe. It's just starting to open up right now. So yeah, the black licorice is one of the things I always look for. Some black cherry, plum, blackberry, just kind of trying to get our favorite nuances from each of these varieties that go into it.
well done. It's a beautiful wine.
Thank you.
Presentation. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Good. And we're going to go over to Soren Christensen, who's been, I know you've been super busy out in the vineyard yourself these days. Soren is the Hearst Ranch Winery winemaker. You there, Soren?
I'm here.
Great.
My wife accused me of going like Weekend at Bernie's style the other night and falling asleep at the table, but I'm here.
Excellent. Glad you're not wearing your sunglasses. We know you're awake now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for having me, and it really is an honor to be in the presence of such a esteemed group of people here. I mean, obviously, I've been in Paso for 22 years now, and I've had the honor of meeting Gary a number of times, and you know, between Justin and the Merrill family, and I've met Robert a bunch of times, and obviously Jay Lohr is a great winery. So it's as one of the younger guys here, just as far as experience, it's quite an honor to be here. And really, I'd like to echo quite a bit of what Joe had said about the versatility and the strong points of the different growing areas of Paso. We have 56 acres here. We are in the Estrella district, which is kind of right up next to Lars's left ear. And we're in the middle of a pretty big replanting right now. So it's been fun in the sense that we've gone out and sourced grapes from a number of different vineyards over the last 3 years to satisfy our needs. And it's just been this great exploration. And I've come to fall in love with El Pomar Cab. I find is incredibly complete. And Adelaida, the strength really lies in that calcareous soil and the great chalkiness it brings. I really feel like I'm just regurgitating a lot of what Joe said. And then the amazing soft fruit character that comes from our own estate vineyard at Estrella. So I really do enjoy the versatility and the blending, and we can achieve a harmonious blend by working from the different sub-AVAs in Paso. So, you know, back in the early 2000s when I first started out, and I'm sure Gary can empathize with this a little bit, a lot of the vineyards that we were sourcing from that weren't winery owned were maybe tended towards overcropped, and there used to be a lot more vegetal character as kind of a hallmark of some of the wines, and that's long gone, which is awesome. as more and more wineries are producing really high-end wines, and growers are falling in line with that goal. But what we have right now is this is our top of the line Cab Sauv. That's a crappy picture. So we do, we have two different tiers of Cabernet Sauvignon, and our largest one, which is still not that big, it's less than 5,000 cases, that's predominantly in distribution, is more available, accessible wine at a younger age. So we make a few hundred cases of this wine every year as kind of a nod to what Paso Cab can be. So we let it hang a little bit longer, but I'm still not an ultra maturity guy. It'll get up to, granted the alcohol in this one's 15.2, and give it a little bit more oak. We're predominantly a neutral oak barrel kind of winery, as you can see behind me here, but we finished this one off with a little bit of Petit Verdot from our estate vineyard. So this is a blend of Adelaida and Estrella, and it really, it's kind of neat how the two complement each other, and you get the beautiful texture of the Adelaida, and we have certainly the Petit Verdot adds to the soft fruit character, but also lengthens the finish. It's quite a nice.
There's a nice note of dark chocolate on the finish I'm picking up.
For sure. Yeah, I apologize. I am just exhausted. I don't have a whole ton to say, so I'm glad a few of you guys went over.
That's all right. You're good. You're in very good shape.
What I will mention, I'm remiss real quick, is that if any of you guys that are tuning in have the opportunity, and I know Paso is not that hot like Gary said, but if it's 110 here, we have this amazing tasting room in San Simeon over by the coast, and you can sip our Paso Robles wines while sitting basically on the beach looking at dolphins play. So that's kind of fun.
Sweet. That's very cool. Sign me up and get us a vaccine so I can get out there, please. So awesome. Thank you, Soren.
Yep.
So next we're going to go over to Brendan Wood, the red winemaker for J. Lore. Brendan, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, doing really good. Glad to be here, and thanks for having me here. And just pretty excited, really. So I'd say that Jerry Lore, our founder, he really got started in the Paso Robles area, kind of in the 1980s, and kind of as the brand has flourished. Well, let me back it up. His main goal really has been to really have control of the wines, really from the ground to the glass. So totally vertically integrated. That's been the main kind of concept for the brand. And so as we've flourished, we've kind of spread out into various parts of the Paso AVA, and we're a cab house for sure. But now, 35 plus years later, we have vineyards and kind of all the corners and in between of the AVA. So to your point, it's winemaking is really in the vineyard, and we just try our best not to screw it up. But what's great about J. Lore is we really get to work with these vineyards from all over Paso. So this is our J. Lore Hilltop Cabernet. We've been making this wine for quite a while. It's got kind of a new packaging in the last couple of years, but the concept behind it is super simple. It's just really showcasing our best fruit that we grow, that's just consistent and really over delivers in quality kind of year after year. And this particular wine it comes from kind of 3 primary vineyards that we grow, or that we farm. So what I thought would be cool is kind of this last weekend I went with my kids out to these vineyards, and we just got some like soil samples and rock samples and stuff, and just to show you the difference of maybe the kind of that soil profile, and then maybe try to kind of get some correlation between the soil profile and the flavor that kind of comes from it, and why we use those vineyards to blend. So kind of the first vineyard I wanted to talk about was our Jean vineyard, which is kind of on your map. It's right up to your right, kind of the Justin to the so kind of where there you go, where you see Justin, so kind of right over there, and it's actually probably off of the map over there. but these are the kind of rocks that you're going to see. That's out there in the in this vineyard there. So and we call this kind of like there's a mixture of kind of this lime calcareous sandstone and then calcareous marl, and that's all. This is all from that ancient seabed that had that kind of geological.
I can almost see a little bit of an outline of maybe some sort of fossil in there.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah, and here's actually another one here that's pretty cool. My son found that. Yeah, so
How old's your son?
So super. Don't ask me how old these are. They're pretty ancient, but anyway. So, but what's so good about these rocks is that they really have a lot of. They're like sponges that hold the moisture in, and so you always hear about like vineyards. Or grapevines, they need water, but they don't like to have wet feet, right? They don't like to have be waterlogged or whatever. So they can kind of nurse up next to these little sponges, if you will, and just tap that water as they need it. So so there's this nice kind of richer topsoil out there with all these. This is a small version of a rock that you find out there, but there's all these out there that kind of provide that feature. And a lot of this Adelaida area and Templeton Gap and those areas, I mean, you can really actually dry farm. If you see these old walnut trees that are growing out there, they don't use any irrigation whatsoever. So that's what's really cool about that vineyard out there. Really forested and rugged. It's the westernmost vineyard in all of the Paso AVA. There's some that are farther out that are in kind of York Mountain AVA, but not in Paso. And so kind of the flavor profile from this vineyard that we normally experience is kind of this real fresh and vibrant, kind of energetic on the palate, and kind of red fruit, and I almost think of like raspberry or raspberry pez or something like that. And so that's really a nice kind of component of the blend. And then kind of another vineyard, which was kind of in the same similar area, El Pomar area as Matt's vineyard. So kind of where your nose is too, is so that's our Shotwell vineyard. And that to explain the topography of the Shotwell vineyard, it's just these kind of nice rolling, undulating hills, and it's got quite gravelly kind of soil on the top, and then some more kind of alluvial type soil down in the lower section. And so this is kind of hopefully you can see that example of kind of what you're going to see out there. So there's kind of a lot more kind of loam and clay. So a little bit richer soil, but then you're going to get some of these kind of these pebbles and cobbles and kind of small stones that are there that kind of break it up, and allow drainage to happen.
They look pretty well smoothed over too.
Yeah, they're smoothed over. So that's some of that alluvial action that's happening with time. And so, so I really love this vineyard. It's got, I think of it as really that classic old school Cabernet. So where you're getting that cassis and plum, but you can also get some of those, what I think is really pretty, some of those kind of a little bit of minty character, a little bit of savory, black tea. And so that's something that I really like about that vineyard that kind of adds to the blend. And then the third vineyard I wanted to talk about is our Beck vineyard, which is a very, very, very far south in the AVA, just on kind of almost it'd probably be where your belt is, honestly, like on the map or whatever. I mean, it's just so. I'm
not, it's Zoom. I'm not wearing pants.
So and it's actually in a different mountain range. So we're kind of out east of kind of the small town of Santa Margarita. It's called the La Panza mountain range. But it has a lot of the similar characteristics of the Santa Lucia mountain range. It's higher elevation, so this vineyard is like 1,800 feet elevation, but the soil profile when you drive up to it is it's pretty amazing. It like there's some areas where it's kind of eroded away, it's kind of steep, and it kind of reminds me of what are those cliffs kind of when you're going up to on kind of the south of England,
The Dover, the White Cliffs of Dover. There you
yeah,
go.
the cliffs of Dover. This is what a rock from that it looks like. So just super stark white, extremely high pH soils. Not extreme, but on the very high end. So kind of in that 7.5 to 8 pH.
Yeah.
And if you remember that kind of high pH soils makes low pH wines.
Right.
So we get a lot of that acidity there. This is what the actual topsoil looks like. So it's just like totally white, like chalk rock. And so just quite amazing site. Very nutrient poor, where the kind of the Adelaida rock is more yellow.
Yeah.
So that's, there's iron oxide and some of these other minerals that are in there. That's really more nutrient poor.
Yeah.
And so as you can imagine, like everything just struggles to grow out there. So the berries that are out there are extremely small, extremely just concentrated, got some good acid. And so, yeah, it's just extremely dark wines and kind of more on the black fruit or dark fruit of, spectrum of Cabernet. So think like blackberry, cassis. You can even get some blueberry character and some kind of like baking spices out of it. So that's kind of my, when making this wine, that's kind of my world in a nutshell as far as Cabernet goes. Just feel real fortunate to be able to really work with all these different vineyards and kind of have a big perspective of the AVA. So
That's cool. Well, thank you for sharing your dirt with us.
awesome.
Seriously, that was really cool to see. I appreciated that because that's what it's all about. We talk about terroir, but it's the real deal.
Right on.
So thank you. Thank you very much.
Got it.
Appreciate it. All right. So last but not least, although Gary Eberly already told us that you're the understated man, Robert. Robert is the grower relations director of Opolo, and you've been obviously making tracks around the valley for quite a while. So
Yeah,
I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, went to work for Gary Eberly in March of 1987.
There you go.
Yeah, definitely ahead of the curve around here. So we've all seen a lot of changes, but that's a long time ago. Anyway, so I'm, again, like you said, the grower relations manager with Opolo Wines. Opolo Wines is family owned. It's owned by David Nichols and Rick Quinn. They're neighbors, actually. Their families are neighbors in Camarillo, and they discovered the area 25 years ago or so, and just couldn't stay away. So they were a little ahead of the curve too. We would be talking about the 2017 cab, but somehow we stubbed our toe and didn't get you a bottle. And I'm getting ready to harvest my place tonight. So I'm at my home right now, but picking some Petit Syrah tonight that goes to Opolo, by the way. We're up in the Adelaide at the top of Peachy Canyon. So nice. I can talk all about calciferous, calcareous soils. At Opolo, we have about 200 estate acres, which are split 50-50 between the east side and the west side. So that gives us a unique opportunity that most estate wineries don't have, although like J. Lohr, I'm in good company here, they have a similar opportunity where we can leverage the differences between the plummy Cabernets that are on the east side and the more firm tannic wines on the west side. And that gives us a lot of blending power. And so, people think of Opolo as a Zinfandel house because we have a lot of our accolades and whatnot come from Zins, but in reality, our Bordeaux varieties I think they're some super nice wines. Like I said, we own 200 acres, but we also have other partner vineyards that we have long-term relationships with out in the El Pomar area. So that's sort of like, it's not really on the east side. It's not really on the west side. It's in the Templeton Gap area. So they have their own afternoon climate out there. The El Pomar area and the east side, they both share the characteristic of having these crazy diurnal temperature swings where it could be 98 degrees in the daytime and 55 degrees that same night. It's crazy the atmospherics in the area. But anyway, Joe's slide from earlier was really interesting about how the rains occur between the east side and the west side. You have the hills, the clouds will kind of hang up in the hills. And so it's not unusual to get 2 or 3 times the rainfall that we see at the airport, say out in the Estrella district. You know, you get 2 or 3 times the rain up at the top of Santa Lucia Mountains there as you go maybe a little bit west of where Justin's winery and tasting room are. But, oh, and you mentioned early on that Gary was very kind to me on his, when he was kind of beginning his presentation. And I just want to point out for, you know, in all honesty and clarity that Gary Eberly is my paid shill. And so I'll be sure to send off the check on time this month to make sure that, you know, I stay in good, you know, don't fall into arrears with Gary and our billing policy. So let's see, what have I not touched on? Because everyone else has been so good about describing Paso. It's a fantastic area. It's a diverse area.
You're a native of Paso,
maybe
right?
to set things off a little bit. I was the first consulting winemaker at Opolo 20 years ago. My responsibilities there have changed in recent years, so I'm doing more grower relations things. I had my own winery here for 20 years, and then when my relationship with Opolo changed and became a very full-time endeavor, then I ended up closing my winery to take that opportunity with Opolo, and Opolo made that transition very, very easy. So I'm no longer a part of the winemaking team on a day-to-day basis, although we do group blending sessions and things. But you know, in the winery, Opolo has been fortunate to be, and I'm sure that we're not the only ones in this group doing this, but there are programs that are available where you monitor the phenolics that you're extracting from your grapes during fermentation. And it gives you literally like as many times a day as you want to do it. You can run these analyses to see how your phenolics are binding, how your tannins are binding. So as those phenolics are being extracted from the skins, then we can actually monitor how those free phenolics are reacting with one another and binding. And so you end up with some kind of counterintuitive decision-making in the winemaking process, where you're actually trying to keep your wines warmer longer, where you're heating a red wine instead of, even after pressing, where you're heating a wine instead of cooling it or whatever. And so it's amazing what you can do with the ultraviolet spectrophotometer and some smart people behind you. But so, you know, from a winemaking perspective, that's really helped us make our Bordeaux programs go from, you know, good to something really special. So, and like I say, we're not the only people doing it, but I just wanted to geek out on something. You know, ordinarily it would be our PR people, you know, marketing people that would be doing these things. Usually they keep me away from the public, rightly so. However, because it's a sommelier group, we're talking to people who are not your typical consumers. We're talking to people who they want more information. They want stuff to kind of chew on and geek out on. So I'm sure we'll have some interesting questions when we're all said and done.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they let you out of the dark.
Well, this time of year, I'm lucky to get out at all.
Exactly. We're lucky to have you here. So thank you for that. Talk to me a little bit about the wine that either didn't get shipped or my wife found it and drank it first. I see from your tasting notes, they're talking about hickory smoke, cooking herbs, and pepper melange.
Yeah, it's a really pretty wine. You know, the color, of course, it's beautiful. That was early on with our experimenting with these phenolic assays. And I mean, it showed. You know, we got a nice gold medal in the San Francisco Chronicle this year with that wine. But again, that's a wine that capitalizes on the fact that we've got these plummy, soft tannins that are on our vineyards over in on the east side, which is actually our vineyards on the east side are very near Gary Eberly's place, as a matter of fact, just a few miles north of him. So we share a lot of that. Those were back to these alluvial soils, water polished stone, that sort of thing that you see in the vineyards. So we've got these nice plummy soft tannins from that. And then we have more of the very firm tannins from our west side properties. And so again, going back full circle with the discussion is, it gives a lot of blending power, and to wineries that have an opportunity to source their fruit from around the AVA, if they have programs that are big enough to need more than one vineyard, well, then that's it's just another feather in Paso Robles' cap to look at that as a way to leverage the fact that Paso's got this beautiful, diverse growing area. And if maybe you have varieties that need more heat, maybe you want, a Petit Verdot to be in a little bit warmer spot. Well, then you can, if you don't grow it yourself in a warm spot, then, there are a lot of growers in the area who would be glad to sell you, a truckload or a few tons of their Petit Verdot that may be in one of the warmer northern most sub-AVAs or parts of the Paso Robles growing area. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Because like I say, everyone's done such a good job describing everything.
Well, let me ask you a question. So you along with Eberly have been the self-proclaimed old timers of the show, and we have a question about the ageability of Paso Cab. So in your experience, and Gary can jump in here if he likes as well, in your experience, how does Paso Cab age? What can we expect?
Well, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where I was fortunate enough to get to taste one of the HMR Cabernets that Dr. Hoffman produced on his property, which is actually, I can look out my window right there, and that's where the Cabernet block was, because in fact, my back gate says HMR on it. But anyway, those were fabulous wines. I mean, how many years ago was that? Gary, what vintage would that have been? That would have been like
75, 76.
Something like that. Yeah. And so all these years later, that wine was fabulous. I mean, it was showing its age, but I mean, it was showing its age properly. The color shifts, it becomes more of a brickish color. We've all experienced that, but I mean, that's normal. That's what you expect to see. But I mean, the wine, obviously it's softer and you've got the precipitate, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, the wine presented itself beautifully. And even Gary, with some of the old Estrella wines, some of those are fabulous. I mean, I haven't had one in a while because you haven't invited me over in a long time, but.
Hey, you're invited. I'll tell you what, I still have every single Cabernet I've made since 76.
Wow.
And with rare exceptions, I've got multiple cases and large bottle formats of them. Something I learned from Mr. Mondavi. I was very fortunate to have Joe Paterno and Mondavi as mentors. And, but I'll tell you what, Chris, my winemaker, Chris Eberly, who's not related to me, on Thursdays runs down and he is taking wine out of my cellar, and we open it, and he'll open old European wines, old Napa wines, some of the old Eberly, Estrella, and with rare exception, there are a couple of wines that I don't go out of my way to show people that I made, but wines like the 87 Cab, probably the second best wine I ever made in my career. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. He had a lot more hair then, damn it. But yeah, no, I'll tell you what, Paso Robles Cabernets, if they are aged properly, and I mean not in a closet where the temperature goes up and down, but just aged properly. It doesn't have to be at 58 degrees, but a nice constant temperature, they age beautifully. And I get very little bricking. I mean, I can open up a 77, 78 Estrella, 80 Cab, 82, 87, 85. They're not bricking. They're still nice and red. And the bottle bouquet is amazing. I mean, you're not going to say, oh my God, that's Cabernet, that's Cassis Plum. That's not, but it's the, the nice bottle bouquet. There's no aldehyde in it. There's no volatile acidity. They just age beautifully.
Well, everything I'm understanding is that the soils that you guys have there tend to give the wines this good backbone of acidity. That
yeah, well, the calcareous. We've got, everybody wants to call it limestone, and there is some limestone around, but it's calcareous slates and shales, which is a calcium silicate. But it's the calcium is the part that really is the important part, and we are typically, I would say, a typical Paso vineyard is going to run between maybe a pH of 8 and 6.5, but most of them are going to be about 7.5, right there in that middle, slightly basic, and it makes the most spectacular, I mean, holds the acid. And Paso wines hold the acid, and we have these really solid, stable phenols. The flavonoids, they don't drop out. You don't lose the color. You don't get the orange bricking. They still stay red.
That's fantastic. That's great. So another question that I have that I think has also been brought up in some of the Q&As, and this is a question for anybody who wants to address it, and I don't know what's going on. Has Paso been affected at all by any of the fires?
Well,
I guess it depends.
The compounds that actually make up the aromatic issues that come up later in winemaking are actually pretty volatile. And so if the fires are 100 miles away from us, like what we had in Monterey County, you know, just the time that it takes for these particles of soot and ash and whatnot to make their way to us, well, then you've got ultraviolet light from the sun, you've got you know, ozone in the atmosphere, you've got all these countervailing forces that are oxidizing and essentially destroying the glycol that is the problem with the soot and ash that lands on the grapes and ultimately could end up being a big problem for winemakers.
Robert is absolutely right on with this. The phenols that are coming out of the woods, the wood that is burning, are very reactive, very volatile. They oxidize quickly. You've got ozone, you've got so many things. And I would say, I think most chemists would tell you 20 miles downwind of a fire, these phenols have essentially been neutralized. We're very fortunate in that I think the closest fire we had to us was like maybe 70 miles this year. I see very little smoke taint in any of the fruit and Paso Robles. We had 2 days where the smoke was pretty fierce, but again, it had come 70 miles, and by that point, the phenols that were really going to cause a problem were essentially neutralized. So Robert is absolutely correct on this.
Okay.
Do I owe you more now, Gary, for that, for shilling for me?
Yeah, you keep sending the money, damn it.
You guys are great, the Eminence Grease. And talk to me a little bit about rainfall. How has rainfall been? Has it been consistent? And again, this is open for everybody in terms of the climate. Has rainfall changed a bit over the years, or has it been consistent? I've heard a lot of talk about dry farming, which seems to be the norm and a part of the terroir. But do you guys see that changing at all?
Well, you know, when I was working with Doc Olmo and Doc Alley on this, I collected the rainfall data from 1881. A lot of that was down at the Paso Robles Waterworks, and then it transitioned out to the flight service station at the airport. And if you look over the century that we're really talking about, rainfall in Paso Robles is cyclic. Our average runs essentially right around 13 inches. The last decade, we're probably slightly lower, but not nearly as low as some years. And then some, I don't know. I don't think statistically the change in rainfall can really be relevant yet at this time. I think we need a little bit more time.
Right.
Probably maybe not even in our lifetimes to say that the change has been that significant.
Good. That's good news. All right. Well, great. I'm going to refer back to Michelle. I've been trying to field questions here, and I think I got most of them. But Michelle, can you tell us if there's any other questions that you've seen come in that we should be addressing right now?
Excuse me. Hi. Great session, everybody. And actually, it looks like most of the panel has been addressing the questions as they've been coming up in the Q&A. So I think we've gotten through pretty much everything that's come up at this point. If we missed anything, we'll definitely circle back to the panel and readdress, but I think we've caught everything at this point, Lars.
Fantastic. All right. So Meredith, if you're still there, thank you. Thank you, Michelle, and SommCon, and the Paso Robles Cab Collective. This has just been a lot of fun, and every panelist has just brought something great to the table today, showing us your dirt, your rocks, your stories, your wines. It's been fantastic. Great learning experience, and a lot of, as dear friends of mine in the Somm community like to say, a lot of testable information there. So thank you all very much. Remember to that this will be recorded and available on the SommCon and Somm Journal websites, and we'll have the recap in the November issue of the tasting panel. And thank you guys all, and Viva Paso Robles. And I feel like I want to do the Paso Doble now.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Somm Journal and SommCon and Cab Collective for helping us out with this.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Happy harvest.